Good afternoon, everyone. I hope you are well. Are you well? Good to hear. I hope you've had a good day so far. My name's Samantha Stimpson. I'm the founder and CEO of SLS 360. We're a consultancy that supports organisations to be more accessible, more inclusive, more diverse through organisational design, strategy development, policy and practice review, training and workshops, and the like. Also, full disclosure, I have a non-visible disability called Meniere's disease. If you haven't heard of it before, it causes an onset of vertigo, can be very sudden, very debilitating. I've briefed my panel and obviously C-Vent. If it should happen while I'm on stage, I will hold up my hand, I will be escorted off the stage and just given somewhere to lie down quietly. But touch wood and fingers crossed, that's not happening today. So why are we here today? Well, in our increasingly diverse world, accessibility isn't just a nice to have. We all know that it's actually fundamental in creating inclusive spaces where everyone feels welcome. Whether it's a physical venue or a digital platform, the goal has to be in events that all attendees can fully participate meaningfully. And I think this is a moral and a legal imperative and something that we should all be considering in hospitality and event planning. So today, with my lovely panel members, we're going to explore some strategies, some insights, some challenges and some opportunities on how we can make this a reality. So let me introduce the panel. To my left here is Stephen Cutchins, and he is Senior Manager of Accessibility in C-Vent with over 20 years in IT. And for the last 15 of those 20 years, he's helped clients achieve accessibility-related goals. His passion has been influenced greatly by growing up with his mother, who was an amputee, and two cousins who were in wheelchairs. So accessibility is therefore very near to his heart. Welcome, Stephen.
Thank you very much. Nice to be here.
Next to Stephen, we have Shani Danda, who is an inclusion and accessibility specialist and broadcaster. She's a prominent UK-based disability specialist known for her advocacy on inclusion, and she's been recognised on the Shaw Trust Disability Power 100. She's established initiatives such as Diversability and the Asian Disability Network. And her work emphasises the importance of intersectional inclusion and creates platforms for people to share their experiences. Welcome, Shani.
Thank you.
And last but not least, we have Laura Barangelli, Director of Group Sales at Star Hotels, with extensive experience in hotel sales. Laura is an established professional in the MICE industry, and she's on a mission to explore MICE business opportunities in Europe and beyond, ensuring they are all inclusive and accessible. Thank you.
Lovely to meet you all.
So we're going to dive in with a few questions, and afterwards we will hopefully have some time for you to ask some questions with a roaming mic. So the first question is around accommodating needs in older venues. So we know that there are many older venues out there built back in the Victorian times which present challenges for accessibility. So how can organisers and venues navigate these limitations when retrofitting just simply isn't feasible? And Stephen, I'll start with you.
So I think the first thing is be open. I think be tested. I think there are organizations. So I work mostly in the digital space, and we have auditors that will come in and test our sites to make sure they're accessible. There are also organizations, especially wheelchair organizations or even individuals who do this as a service. Get it done. Find out how the site is, how your hotel, how your venue space is, and then at least get a plan to start working on it. And very importantly, be open about your limitations. I want to mention, and this is, anybody been to St. Paul's Cathedral? It's beautiful. I had a friend who, when I mentioned I was coming, she's in a wheelchair, that I mentioned I was coming over to London, she said, oh my God, you have to go to St. Paul's. It has, she used the word, beautiful, accessible entrance. St. Paul is, I'm from America, it's older than our country. So if St. Paul's can do it, they have, for where they did, they added lifts, they let you know the size of the lift, they had a wheelchair entrance that works with the wheelchair, and they said they did things like to get to the certain part of the cathedral, there's 15 steps. So they let users know, not just if it's accessible. In some cases, if somebody has a mobility disability, they won't be able to access it. So I think get tested, find out where you are, and let your attendees, let your users know so they can make the decision and then just make a plan. Because again, I mean, a 300-year-old venue, if they can make it work, we have hope.
Absolutely, thank you. Just being open about that. Shani, what are your views on this, these older venues?
Yeah, it is a challenge, and it can mean the difference of choosing to work with the venue or not. But I think this industry is such a creative industry. If the venue's struggling, let's help them find the solutions together as well. I think it You know, if we can send rockets to space for 5 minutes for the fun of it, like, why can't we find accessible solutions? But I think a big part of that as well is having the most accurate information available as well on a website. Because as Stephen was saying, people can then be informed and make choices of whether they want to face that battle of if it would be inaccessible for them or not. And we shouldn't make assumptions about what people can and can't do. You know, I can manage steps fine. Would I prefer a ramp? In some cases, but in some cases, no. So it's important to know where you are. If you can make improvements, see them as an investment, not as just a place where you've just got to shell out loads of money. You will get that return on investment. Accessibility benefits everybody. Everyone will benefit.
Absolutely. Thank you. And that's really important what you said about being really open about it and just saying, well, look, this is what we can do, this is what we can't do, but also not making assumptions.
Yeah.
Oh, you're in a wheelchair, so you must need this.
Exactly.
I think that's really key. Thank you. Laura, what are your views on this?
My vision is the following, because we are all lots of us here in this area are hospitality professionals, so our role is to make people comfortable. And to do that, it's important, like Stephen said, assess and test, and then talk to the clients. What we do in our life of sales professional is to understand what are the client's requirements, whatever they can be. And so we have to ask questions on top of that. And as you said, we have to also be open to the fact that, especially in countries like mine, in Italy, Star Hotels has 30 properties throughout Italy, and some of them are located in Rome. They are historical, beautiful 5-star buildings, which we have been recently renovated. So we faced these issues to comply with local laws, which are very restrictive, they're very strong on that, and at the same time retrofit the properties as much as possible to make our clients, both individuals, so clients attending incentives on events, comfortable. So the key to me is, first of all, understand what the client wants and have an open conversation, because in historical buildings, most of the times, as you said before, there are many minor or bigger issues. We have to guarantee something which cannot be changed in any way, so easy accessibility, the elevators, but at the same time, we have to listen to our clients. We can have meetings which are dedicated to special clients with special needs, or usual audiences where we have different needs. So the thing is that sales professionals really need to ask questions, not understand, and not wait to have the site inspection to discover that something is not working. So I think this is the key, to work before, to understand before, and from there, as you said, it's an open conversation. It's something we can improve together. We can change. We must have some solutions ready at hand, but we would like, everyone wants to avoid to arrive at the last minute and not be ready for any requirements. So I think preparations, talking to clients, be ready, and listen every time.
You know, Shani mentioned return on investment. So Accenture did a study where they looked at companies that do well in a thing called the Disability Equality Index, that an organization in the US called Disability In does this survey, does this Disability Equality Index. And they said, you know what, let's see if the companies, it's all about supporting their employees, but it's the exact same applies to digital, to hotel space, to venue space. Let's see if the companies that are more inclusive actually make more money. They wanted to know strictly ROI. Yeah. They found that the companies that are more inclusive to their employees with disabilities make more profit, higher income. So if you can go and say, hey, look, yes, it's going to cost X dollar, euro to do this, over time we can make 1.5x. Would they do it? Of course they would. Yeah. So I think it's paralysis of not knowing, but if you can show that ROI could be there, and again, they proved it, why not do it?
Yeah. And specifically around digital accessibility, there's some research in the US that shows for every $1 that's invested in digital accessibility, the return on investment is 99%. It's a $100 return. You can't argue with that.
No, you really can't. And I'm so glad that you brought that in, because it is a business imperative, and people just don't see that. I want to pick up on something that most of you mentioned, which is this idea of listening to people, finding out from individuals what they want. But the next question is around when guests don't disclose. So what can organisers do when guests actually don't disclose their accessibility needs in advance? How do you ensure that you prepare for all potential situations?
So I think you've already made a mistake in the way you ask, and I've talked to some people at the accessibility booth. In the US, we have what's called ADA, or Americans with Disabilities Act, and if we ask for a venue, do you need an ADA accessible room, or do you use ADA accommodations, yes or no? Or they put a text box. And if I ask someone a question, tell me about your reality, your entire group of limitations that you have. You might be in a wheelchair, you might have a service animal, you have a personal care assistant, you might be blind. If I ask you to put that in a text box, you're not coming to my event. You're not going to be comfortable. So what I say is, you can't ask somebody, are you blind? Do you have multiple sclerosis? Are you deaf? But you can say, do you require a sign language interpreter? Will you be accompanied by a personal care assistant? Will you be accompanied, do you use a service animal? Do you have a mobility device? I know the ways they need to be accommodated. They're vastly more willing to let me know, yes, I'm coming with a service animal, and yes, I'm in a wheelchair, I use a mobility device, versus just a text box. So I'm kind of flipping this a little bit in saying we've already made a mistake if they don't let us know.
Absolutely. So it's thinking about how we approach getting that information from individuals in a way which is going to be most useful and helpful for event organisers. Shani, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think we have to remember, though, it's deeply personal information, and when 70% of disabilities are non-visible, people don't want to share, and that's okay too, because why aren't our events open to everybody anyway? And, I was born with my health condition. I see no different to the fact I've got brown eyes and brown hair. And I don't think an event organiser would ever sit there and think, this event is not going to be accessible to people with brown eyes. But that's the equivalent of what happens when we don't think about accessibility, because we're not thinking about people's access needs. And I think even the word disclose is like, oh, we're going to come out the cupboard and reveal something. Like, I think even the language is a bit scary sometimes. So I think we need to avoid asking people for the names of their conditions, the names of their impairments. I don't know many people that work in this space that are also medical professionals. You don't need people's medical history. What we really need to focus on is giving people good information about the space, the venue, or the event, and saying, do you have any access requirements? Because what we should be focusing on is reducing and removing any disabling barriers that could prevent somebody from not having an equitable experience.
Yeah, that's really, really important. Thank you. And Laura, what are your thoughts on this?
I think that it also takes, again, back to communication. When these special needs are not disclosed, what we should learn to do, and I openly say that we have to improve on our website, is to communicate what we can do for our guests and what we are not having at the moment, but we can provide by using a local network of services, of agencies, of persons who are specialized. I think this gives really the attention that we think we have to give to our guests, respecting their privacy. It's an additional touch. And communication on the websites is something which we are improving, because as most of our companies, we are going through a journey in the ESG, and part of the ESG journey is also diversity, is inclusion, is making everything easy and comfortable. So we also have to improve on this and to communicate in a simple way, taking your hints. I like it very much in the way we can inform our clients without obliging them to disclose, especially at a certain stage of the negotiation. Usually this comes during the negotiation when the event is going to be confirmed. Everyone wants to give as much as information on the event to make it successful. But sometimes at the beginning, this is part of the assessment, and it must be done in a very sensitive way. So we have to share what we can do, And we also have to ask the right questions in the right way to the clients, especially if we have a building that has some, let's say, issues. It's an old building, so we know that we might not be able to offer everything. So on both sides, we need to have this ability of setting our communication in a way that brings our common goals together.
Yeah, that's really key, that use of language, because, language has power, doesn't it? And if you're just telling people, tell me your condition, again, that's a barrier. Right. And the organisations that I work with, we say things like, well, when are you at your best? When are you able to do the best? And what is a barrier to that? What might cause a barrier to that? So then they're using language around, well, this is what I need to help me to achieve. This is what I need for things to be accessible without having to disclose anything. Yeah. And also, everybody, we're all diverse ability. We all have our own way of thinking, of being. So to kind of limit it to people with these labels, every single person in this room could say, well, this is how you get the best out of me. This is how I would prefer to be in a space or access a space. And I think if we just have that underlying factor, is really key.
And with the best intention, like, language can be polarizing. Not all disabled people want the label disabled. If you'd met me at 20, I hated my disability identity. Now I'm nearly 40 and I'm the proudest disabled person ever. And people, the language of accessibility isn't universal for everybody. There's global differences, and it's also about people's own personal journey on this as well. So when we use language that isn't polarizing, like barriers, access needs, it makes it a bit more approachable and I think easier for everybody.
Yeah, I agree. So this brings up this next question, and Laurie, you touched on this a little bit when you said that organisations should be honest about the fact that this is going to be inaccessible for certain people. These are things we're working on. These are things we can't do anything about. Do you think that organisers and venues should aim to meet actually all potential needs? And is it actually realistic and feasible for event organisers and venues to aim to meet all potential accessibility needs? And where do people kind of draw the line? I'm going to start with Laura, actually.
Well, I think there are some points that cannot be, removed in any way. If my venue is not accessible at all, there's nothing I can do. If it has been built in a way that we don't have ramps, so we don't have any possibilities of making our guests comfortable, we should be open and tell it. So there's a bare minimum, something which is, in terms of basic accessibility, we should be drawing the line. But there's always a way of talking to the client and understanding what is really their expectations, and they cannot accept anything different, and what we can offer. So, and if we are not able to offer, we always, as hotel professionals, have to offer solutions. It might not be a solution offered by the hotel, but there are a number, as I said before, a number of companies that provide AV equipment, any kind of things that we might not have in the hotel, but it can mitigate and help and make the client say, okay, they're not perfect, but they're trying to meet my requirements, and so I'm happy to do the event. And again, I think this is, yes, communication. This is very important part of staff training. Our people need to understand, to use the correct language, to offer the right solutions, to tell frankly what we can do and how we can use external vendors to supply with that. So again, it's always a win-win situation. It's always a negotiation in between the parties. Yeah. That's what I really, truly believe.
Thank you. And Shani, just if you answer the same question, whether or not organisers should actually aim to meet all potential needs, but also, are there any kind of core accommodations that you think should be considered a non-negotiability for accessibility?
Yeah, just building on what you said, I think it's impossible for anybody to meet everyone's needs. There's no such thing as fully accessible. What might be inclusive and accessible for one person could completely render it inaccessible for somebody else. And I should have mentioned I worked in events as an event manager for 10 years, and I did my dissertation on the barriers to accessible leisure. And I went into it thinking it's physical accessibility. That has to be the number one reason why disabled people aren't accessing venues and so on. But it wasn't. It was customer service. Mm-hmm. And that's because when you think about it, many of us live in a world that isn't designed for us. But we manage. I live in London and I can't use the tube and it pisses me off. Can you imagine? I don't get anywhere on time. I spend thousands in taxis. But I'm still out here living and I still get to where I need to get to somehow. So, I think we also need to be given the credit that we deserve in that way too. Like, if we have the information, we can make that choice. But you mentioned customer service, and I think that is so key. But in terms of some broad things for people to think about, information on the website. I want to attend an event in Dubai in December. I contacted the organisers a month ago about accessibility. I still haven't heard back. I'm not having an equivalent user experience, and as I'm getting older, I'm getting more angry about it. I'm like,
more grumpy.
I'm like, well, you're not going to get my money now, and I'm going to do something else with that time because you've pissed me off, just because you didn't have the information, which is so easy to do. But other things would be like captioning everything and making sure that you're signposting people to whether there's parking available, the nearest tube stations, train stations, whether they are step-free or not. It could be letting people know if you're already going to pre-book a sign language interpreter. That has meant for me in my events, I have attracted BSL users because they didn't even have to ask for one, because in my marketing I said there would always be one.
Fantastic.
And it's things like that. I think wherever possible, try and preempt basic needs like that. Yeah. Having a quiet room. Oh, and please, can we have height adjustable podiums? The amount of events I speak at, I've only used a podium twice, because why are there no height adjustable ones? I think this needs to be my next business.
Thank you. And finally, Stephen, so just a reminder of those questions, whether or not you think that organisations and venues actually should try and meet all accessibility needs, and what are some of the core accommodations that you think should be provided?
So I think they covered the in-person. I'll cover the digital a little bit. I think captions. Actually, you mentioned that. Captions have to be period, end of statement. And it could be behind the screen. It can be on a dedicated monitor, which I love. It could be just on a mobile app. But somehow you need to let people who either aren't unable to hear you or may have difficulty in the back. There's noises. It's far away. You can't hear. And I think the website has to be accessible, because that covers somebody who's unable to hear. But what if somebody's blind, has a physical disability? You have to have a site that meets the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines. And European Accessibility Act, coming up in June of next year, says by law any business doing or any organization doing business either with or within European Union by law has to have an accessible website. So it has to work for somebody who's blind, for somebody who's deaf, for somebody with physical disability, just period. And then you have to make sure they know, hey, this is how we're going to accommodate you so they'll be comfortable to come.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much. Fantastic panel. Thank you. I think we have a few minutes left if anyone has any questions now. I know it's usually done on the digital app, but I've been told today we're going to go off-piste and have a roaming mic. So there's a lovely person at the back there. If you have a question for any of the panel, please raise your hand and they'll come over to you. Don't be shy.
I thought the European Accessibility Act mentioned people would be like,
yeah.
Yes.
I'm in a lot of trouble for that.
Okay, I think... Are you pointing? Oh, here we go. Thank you so much.
That is a can of worms, the European accessibility. What would you say are your top things to consider in there for somebody who is building a new website or wants to adjust their existing website so that it's in line with those new regs?
So for starters, there's a dozen, Wave, Axe, Site Improve, there's a bunch of different tools. Run one of those basic tools and make sure you just don't get, because it'll say red errors, yellow warnings. Yellow, you have to check with a human. Run the basic scan. I like Wave. I'm not I don't get a commission. Maybe I should, but Wave is an organization called WebAIM. It's Web Accessibility in Mind. It's run out of, I think, Utah State University. They make a tool called Wave that can check your site. Run that and make sure it doesn't have those super low-hanging fruit of accessible errors. I would at least start with that. And then you can do things like start running with the keyboard, make sure that works. But Yeah, and then you can go the crazy deep dive like we do of let's have ARIA regions and all the, you need a software engineering degree for that, which I don't have, so I'm not that smart.
Okay, what was that? Wave?
It's called WAVE, W-A-V-E. Okay. It's by WebAIM, W-A-I-M.
Lovely.
Really cool little tool.
Can I just share a watch out as well?
Yeah.
There will be lots of people trying to sell you accessibility overlays. Stay away from these things because they are not doing what they claim to be doing, and then you might think you have met your obligations in terms of compliance, but you won't have, and if you don't know, then yeah, it's really unethical.
I am so glad you mentioned overlays. I could do a 4-hour session on
Yeah.
overlays. I won't call companies, but if anyone claims with a single line of code or one little button that you can click and be accessible, poof, it's not true.
Yeah.
You have to get in there and dig into the source code.
Thank you. So a few recommendations and watch outs there for you. Amazing. We are out of time. Can you believe it? We could definitely have spoken longer on that.